I didn't find lipstick on her collar or some dramatic text lighting up her phone. I found a hotel key card wedged inside the tiny zippered pocket of her purse while I was looking for a painkiller. It had the hotel's logo printed across the front. The problem was simple: we had never stayed there together. I stared at that piece of plastic far longer than I probably should have. We've been married for 12 years. 2 kids. Mortgage. Shared calendars. Friday takeout. The kind of life that feels so predictable you stop questioning it. I honestly believed we had made it through the hardest years already. My wife always laughed when people talked about secret lives. "Who has the energy?" she'd joke. I laughed too. Looking back, I think normality was the disguise. Nothing about our marriage screamed disaster. We argued about dishes, school schedules, and whose turn it was to buy groceries. Ordinary problems. Safe problems. I slipped the key into my pocket without saying a word. Something inside me already knew that once I asked about it, my old life would be gone forever. I told myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe she'd gone there for a work conference. Maybe a friend had borrowed her purse. Maybe the card was old and had somehow survived months inside that hidden pocket. I wanted every explanation except the obvious one. So I did something I'd never done before. I started paying attention instead of trusting automatically. She suddenly became protective of her phone. If I walked into the room, she'd turn the screen over. She smiled at messages she never shared anymore. When I asked what was funny, she'd answer, "Just something from work." Work had become the answer to everything. Late meetings. Team dinners. Weekend planning sessions. I remembered that 6 months earlier she'd started wearing perfume on ordinary Tuesdays. At the time, I thought it was sweet. I even complimented her. Now every memory rearranged itself into something uglier. The hotel key stayed hidden in my desk drawer. Every morning I almost handed it back and asked the question that terrified me. Every morning I lost my nerve. A week later, suspicion stopped feeling like paranoia and started feeling like a pattern. She began leaving the house earlier than usual, saying traffic had gotten worse. Yet her office was only 20 minutes away. Some evenings she'd come home exhausted, but her makeup looked freshly touched up instead of worn off after a long day. Then one Friday, while we were watching TV, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She was in the kitchen. The screen lit up with a preview before it locked. "I miss waking up next to you already." That was all I saw. No name. Just the message. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually be sick. She walked back into the room, noticed my face, and immediately grabbed the phone. "Everything okay?" she asked, almost too casually. Yeah, I lied. For the rest of the night, neither of us heard a single word of the movie. I kept replaying those 7 words in my head. Not "I miss you." Not "see you tomorrow." I miss waking up next to you already. The hotel key suddenly wasn't just a piece of plastic anymore. It had become an answer waiting for a question. I wish I could say I confronted her immediately, but I didn't. Instead, I became someone I barely recognized. The following Tuesday, I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and left work early. I parked across the street from her office, convincing myself I'd feel ridiculous when I saw her walk out with coworkers. She never came out. At lunchtime, I walked into the building and asked the receptionist if my wife was available. The receptionist frowned politely. "Oh, she works from home on Tuesdays now." I actually smiled and thanked her. Worked from home. For almost 4 months. I walked back to my car in a daze, trying to remember every Tuesday she'd kissed me goodbye, complaining about traffic and morning meetings. Every single one had been a lie. I called her anyway. "How's the office?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Busy. I can barely breathe today." That laugh hurt more than the lie itself. She sounded relaxed. Comfortable. as if deceiving me had become just another part of her daily routine. I sat behind the steering wheel for nearly an hour, staring at the hotel key in my palm, wondering how many Tuesdays I had spent trusting someone who wasn't where she said she was. That night, I finally asked about the hotel key. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her. I simply placed it on the kitchen table between us after the kids had gone to bed. She froze. For a split second, all the color drained from her face. Then she forced a confused smile. "Where did you find that?" "In your purse." She picked it up, turning it over in her fingers as if she'd never seen it before. "Oh, one of the girls from work must have handed me the wrong key after a conference. I completely forgot about it. It was a good story. Too good." "So you've stayed there?" She hesitated. "Once. For work." "Really?" "Yes." I looked her straight in the eyes. "I stopped by your office on Tuesday." Silence. "The receptionist told me you've been working from home every Tuesday for months." She didn't answer. She just stared at the table. The ticking clock suddenly sounded deafening. Finally, she whispered, "I can explain." I remember laughing. Not because anything was funny. Because after 12 years together, those 4 words somehow scared me more than any confession possibly could. "I can explain" turned into 2 hours of half-truths that unraveled faster than she could tell them. At first, she insisted nothing physical had happened. "We just talked," she said through tears. He understood me. I asked the simplest question I could think of. "Then why did he text that he missed waking up next to you?" She covered her face with both hands. "I don't know." "Don't lie to me again." Another long silence. Finally, she whispered, "Because we spent the night together." The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't shout. I just sat there, staring at the woman I'd loved for more than a decade, wondering when she had become someone I didn't recognize. "How long?" 8 months. 8 months. Every family dinner. Every birthday. Every anniversary plan. Every "I love you" before bed. All of it had existed alongside another relationship. "Who is he?" She looked up with swollen eyes. "Someone from my old department." "So every Tuesday?" She nodded once. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a foundation cracking beneath a house that still looked perfectly normal from the outside. I thought that would be the worst of it. I honestly believed there couldn't be anything left to confess. Then she looked at me and said, "He didn't know I was going to tell you." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She swallowed hard before answering. "He thought I was going to leave you." The room felt impossibly small. "You were planning to leave?" I thought I was. Thought? I couldn't do it. I wanted to believe that meant she had chosen our family. Instead, it sounded like she had simply failed to make a decision. "So I was your backup plan?" "No," she cried. "That's not fair." "Then explain what is." She kept repeating that she loved me, that she loved him too, that she'd been confused for months. Confused. I hated that word. You get confused choosing paint colors. You get confused reading road signs. You don't accidentally build a second relationship for 8 months. I asked whether our children had ever met him. She shook her head immediately. "No. Never." For the first time that night, I believed her without hesitation. Strangely, that tiny piece of truth only made everything else hurt more. There were still parts of our life she had protected, but not our marriage. The next morning, we acted like actors trapped in a play neither of us wanted to perform. Our kids came downstairs arguing about cereal, completely unaware that their parents had spent the entire night destroying 12 years of marriage across the kitchen table. She made breakfast. I packed lunches. We even reminded each other about our youngest's dentist appointment. It was terrifying how normal we looked. The second the front door closed behind the kids, the silence returned. I ended it, she said quietly. When? Last night. After you found out. So if I hadn't found that key? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That silence was the answer. I asked to see her phone. Without arguing, she handed it over. Their messages stretched back for months. Weekend plans. Inside jokes. Photos from restaurants she'd claimed she'd visited with coworkers. Then I found pictures from that hotel room. Nothing explicit. Just the two of them smiling in matching white bathrobes, holding coffee cups like they were a real couple starting another ordinary morning together. I couldn't breathe. Those smiles looked effortless. I realized I hadn't seen her smile like that with me in a very long time. I left the house before I did something I'd regret. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't recognize the person I was becoming. I drove aimlessly for hours until I ended up parked outside that hotel. I don't know why I went there. Maybe I needed proof that it was real. Maybe I wanted to torture myself. The receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. I'm looking for information about a previous stay, I said, already knowing they couldn't tell me anything. She apologized politely and explained their privacy policy. Of course she did. I walked back outside feeling even more pathetic. The building itself wasn't special. Just another business hotel with clean windows, flower boxes, and people rolling suitcases through the lobby. Yet to me, it felt like sacred ground for a life I never knew existed. I sat on a bench across the street and imagined them checking in together, laughing in the elevator, ordering breakfast, pretending they belonged to each other. Every image in my head was invented. That didn't make any of them hurt less. When my phone rang, it was my wife. I watched it ring until the screen went dark, unable to decide whether hearing her voice would heal me or finish breaking what was left of me. When I finally answered her call, she wasn't crying anymore. Please come home, she said quietly. The kids keep asking where you are. That sentence hit me harder than any apology. Not because of what she said, but because she was right. No matter what had happened between us, I was still their father. I drove back just before dinner. The kids ran to the door, completely unaware that I had spent the afternoon sitting across from the hotel where their mother had built another life. My daughter hugged me. Did work get better? I nodded. Yeah. Just a rough day. That lie tasted bitter. After they went to bed, we sat in the living room again. She told me she'd blocked him. Deleted his number. Sent him a final message saying it was over. I'll quit my job if you want, she offered. I looked at her for a long moment. You think changing jobs fixes this? No. Then why say it? Because I don't know what else to do. Neither did I. The affair had ended. The damage hadn't. For the first time since we met, I realized love and trust were two completely different things, and only one of them had survived that week. The weeks that followed were somehow harder than the night I learned the truth. People assume the biggest pain comes with the confession. It doesn't. The real pain comes afterward, when life expects you to keep functioning. I still had to go to work. Still had to help with homework. Still had to laugh when my son made terrible jokes at the dinner table. Meanwhile, every ordinary moment had become contaminated. If she smiled at her phone, my stomach tightened. If she was 5 minutes late, I imagined the worst. If she reached for me in bed, I wondered whose touch she was remembering. She started therapy. Then she asked me to join her. The therapist talked about rebuilding trust, honest communication, and accountability. I listened. I even participated. But inside, I kept returning to the same question. How do you rebuild trust with someone who looked you in the eye every Tuesday morning, kissed you goodbye, and drove somewhere else entirely? No exercise or worksheet could answer that. I wanted to forgive her. I even wanted to believe her. But wanting something and feeling it are completely different things, and I was learning that the hard way. About 3 months later, I discovered there was one more secret. It wasn't another affair. It was everyone else. My sister called one evening and asked, "How are you holding up?" I froze. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause before she quietly replied, "I thought you knew." Knew what? She told me that my wife's older sister had found out about the affair months before I did. One of their mutual friends knew too. Even a coworker had figured it out. People had been covering for her, making excuses, helping her keep the story straight. I wasn't the only person being lied to. I was the last person allowed to know. That realization hurt in a completely different way. I called my wife after work. Who knew? She didn't pretend to misunderstand. My sister. Who else? She named 3 more people. Each name landed like another stone. So every time they smiled at me, every family barbecue, every birthday dinner. "They told me to tell you," she whispered. "But you didn't." She started crying again. I ended the call without another word. For the first time, I felt betrayed by more than just my marriage. I felt like I'd been living inside a carefully protected illusion while everyone else silently watched. 6 months after everything came out, she moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't a dramatic separation. No screaming. No police. No shattered plates. Just 2 exhausted people admitting that living under the same roof had become another form of pretending. We told the kids together. "We both love you," she said, fighting back tears. "That will never change." Our son asked the question I had been dreading. Did someone do something wrong? Neither of us answered immediately. Finally, I said, "Sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt each other." He nodded as if that explained everything. It didn't. After she left, the house became painfully quiet. Her coffee mug was still in the cabinet. Her favorite blanket was folded on the couch. I kept finding little reminders of a life that no longer existed. Oddly enough, I didn't miss the woman who had lied to me every Tuesday. I missed the woman I believed she was. Those are 2 very different people. That's what grief felt like in the end, not mourning someone who died, but mourning someone who had never really existed in the way I imagined. I wasn't letting go of my wife. I was letting go of the story I told myself about our marriage. It's been almost 2 years now, and people keep asking whether we're getting back together. The honest answer is, I don't know. We're not enemies. We co-parent well. We attend school events together and can sit through a soccer game without making everyone around us uncomfortable. From the outside, we probably look like one of those mature separated couples who handled everything gracefully. That's the part that makes me laugh. There was nothing graceful about waking up at 3 in the morning convinced your entire marriage had been rewritten behind your back. For a while, I became obsessed with details. What room number was it? Who paid for the hotel? Did they celebrate holidays together? Did she ever tell him she loved him in the same voice she used with me? Eventually my therapist asked, "What answer would actually bring you peace?" I couldn't think of one. No amount of information could undo the image of those matching white bathrobes. That's still the photograph that visits me when I'm least expecting it. Not the hotel key. Not the text message. The smile on her face when she thought she was with the person she truly wanted beside her. I still have the hotel key. Not because I'm waiting for answers. Not because I want revenge. I keep it because it reminds me how quietly a life can split in 2. People imagine betrayal arrives with dramatic confessions or obvious clues. Mine fit in the palm of my hand. A cheap plastic key hidden inside a pocket I had never bothered to check before. Sometimes I think about throwing it away. Then I realize the key isn't what keeps the memories alive. I do that all by myself. I've started dating again, slowly. Trust doesn't return the way it disappears. It comes back in tiny pieces, one honest conversation at a time. Even now, I catch myself wondering if every unexplained delay or forgotten message is the beginning of another lie. Maybe that part of me will never completely heal. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love can survive almost anything except a life built on deception. The affair ended. The marriage ended. The anger eventually faded. But the moment I found that hotel key became the dividing line of my life. Everything before it feels like someone else's story. Everything after it is the one I'm still learning how to live.